Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. Today we're here to talk about men's mental health. I want to just get an intro from each of you who you are, starting with you, Tim.
My name's Tim. Work here at NewHope. I'm the youth and worship pastor. Been working here since 2020. Passionate about music, passionate about sport. Love my Cronulla Sharks, New South Wales boy. Love it.
Right. Aaron.
My name's Aaron. Construction, carpenter. I've got 4 kids and a beautiful wife, and I have a passion for my family.
Great. Do I lose marks for not saying about I have a wife as well?
She's watching.
You don't lose marks with us. Not with us.
You've lost your brownie points already.
That's right.
Go, Chris.
Yeah, Chris Myers. So I've been coming to New Hope since I was over 40 years. So this is absolutely my church home. Currently serve as chair of church council, and been actively involved in worship and many other ministries around the place. So looking forward to the chat, Phil.
What do you do?
And boys?
What do you do for a living, Chris?
Yeah, I currently work in orthopaedics. So I spend a lot of time standing in theatre and helping teams put in orthopaedic implants. So it's pretty cool. It's good fun.
Great. Hi, everybody. Richard Beaumont. I've been coming to New Hope for 20 years. Of 2 grown adult boys, men, and 1 wife, Julie. I am the CEO of the Entrust Foundation. We work in 14 or 15 countries doing community development projects amongst some of the poorest people in the world. I do a bit of mentoring and love sailing and snow skiing.
Ooh.
That's me.
Right.
Ben.
Right. Ben Girl. So been in New Hope for more than 10 years. I think it's actually came to New Hope since I finished my commitment with Operation Mobilizations. So found a great church in here. So I am an IT consultant. So passionate about music, art, running, and photography. Yeah.
Sure.
Great.
And I'm Phil. I work here at New Hope. I'm also a musician. Lovely wife, 3 girls. Had my struggles over the years with mental health, but I'm going to share in a minute. Tim, why don't you kick us off? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to share a little bit about you. You might want to talk about something from your life or something from someone around you that's had a bit of a struggle with mental health.
Probably the most recent story would be, we're all affected in COVID in different ways, and everyone had their own different struggles. I remember I got the job here at the start of 2020, and then 6 weeks later we entered a lockdown, so it was like having 2 new jobs in a space of 6 weeks, and I pretty much became a video editor and an audio editor for the first year that I worked here. And I remember when we got to the end of that first year, it didn't really feel like a battle with mental health. It felt like we were working together, trying to figure this thing out, and at the end of that year, when we came out of lockdowns, it felt like we all had like this kind of weird sense of accomplishment of like, oh, I can't believe we actually did that. And just it just almost felt like a whirlwind. The team here working together, it was really cool. The second time around, though, it kind of just took a toll because, you spent the first year, I sat at my dining table and had everything set up on my laptop. Didn't have an office at home or anything. And just sort of sitting back there, and it kind of just felt a bit empty and a bit boring and a bit... I'd gotten married in between the 2 lockdowns, and so my wife was going to work every day, and I was kind of just in a hollow house by myself for sort of 5 or 6 days a week. And so it was just it kind of just sucked the second time around, and it didn't feel like we were, like the same drive that was there the year before just didn't feel like it was there anymore. And I think just sort of the challenge of particularly living in Melbourne and being in just as bigger, if not a bigger lockdown than the first time, it was kind of it was tough. So that was probably the most recent struggle that I had with that, and just sort of being able to battle through that and have to learn how to lean on people when people weren't physically there, and having to stay in communication with people.
Aaron, you talked about seeing people at work that are struggling with challenges, mental health, or just stuff that you see. What do you see? What's some of the things that are going on?
Just guys trying to be bigger and tougher, and trying to show that they're all there and that they've got it going on. It's
what does that mean exactly?
Guys boast about what they've got, money, cars, relationships, and it's what the world wants you to have. and that's obviously not us. That's what we're different, you know, and I think God playing a big part in our lives shows that it's not all about what you have or what you see in other people. It's more about what's inside and how you can help people.
When you see that stuff going on, what does it do to you? How does it make you feel when you see guys trying to purvey a certain...
It makes me think that they're insecure. It makes me think that, what's really going on? If you're bursting with something that doesn't mean a whole lot of... Like, where's the meaning in a relationship that lasts a night or a weekend? Or, do you know what I mean? And, like,
Yeah.
I don't get it sometimes, but some guys, they seem insecure, and they seem that they're struggling with something, but they don't know how to let it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think they're scared too. I think they're scared to talk.
That's great.
It'll make them feel belittled, or they won't look. This is the tough guy, on site. So it's yeah.
Chris.
Yeah, so I'm a bloke in his early, heading towards mid-50s. As a late teenager, I in my late schooling struggled and was diagnosed with depression and anxiety and so forth. And then for 30 odd years thought I'd kind of grown out of that. And in reality, I was just fooling myself and kidding myself, really. I hadn't. And then just a few years ago with work and things just getting on top of, kind of started to realise, hey, I need to talk about this. And so shared with the family. Interesting, I was married for close on 18, 19 years before I actually really even explained to Liz what I was feeling. And that's not, I don't think, an uncommon story. And maybe it comes back to what you're saying, Aaron, in the sense that I think for a lot of people who are challenged in this area, you can actually get really good at acting, and you can put on a mask. And whether that's a mask of bravado or whether that's a mask of humour or whatever it is, part of a self-coping mechanism, and I think I probably lived that for a long time. And then just had to lean in with some folks around and say, hey, this is me, this is who I am, and I need help dealing with it. And yeah, so it's good. So it's been a good journey, and happy to chat about it.
It's great. What about you, Richard? Is this a reality? Are we just making this up?
No, this is a real thing. I've always been a glass half full sort of person, and been incredibly privileged to do some of the things I've done in my lifetime. But, and people see maybe the outside. So I deal with some of the world's poorest people and support and encourage and help and hang out with them in their countries. Just got back from the Congo 10 days ago. But I also deal with some of the world's wealthiest. And I was in Switzerland 6 weeks ago dealing with some of the biggest donors on the planet. And so I hang out with them. And they all have issues. Then I've also got a close family member who's got an addiction. So working through that for the last 7 years has really weighed heavily on us. But being glass half full, we've not let it get on top of us, and we've managed it. And I run a team of 14 or 15 people. And I'm the go-to person when things don't go right. They all come to me and say, can you fix this or can you help with that? And I hold it very lightly. I don't know how. I do actually know how because of my faith. I hold it very lightly. And I don't allow it to impact me. But when you asked me to do this, I've stopped and thought that I'm carrying a lot of crap sometimes, and holding a lot.
Do you mean your own stuff or other people's stuff?
I'm holding a lot of people's stuff. Okay. It's not so much for me.
Yeah.
But I do carry a lot of. I feel I carry a lot of weight. And so the poorest people on the planet, some of the wealthiest people I know, are some of the loneliest, and then family member with heavy addiction and all the baggage that comes with that. So that's us.
It's real.
It is very real.
Okay.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah. What about you, Ben? Is it do you think about your own life? You think about the lives of people around you?
I just look back at last time that I feeling challenges probably very much near at the lockdown period, and working on the project. It was really challenging because I just sort of look back at the beginning of the project. I was one of those person that's not really sort of positive, try to encourage people, and then I was actually affected. This is becoming so anxious about the project, and sleep was affected. It was really bad. Dreaming about how to solve the problems while I'm sleeping. And it was crazy. It was mad. And then I thought I was the only person, but then the whole team, project was actually affecting it. And because of lockdown, we couldn't actually talk at all because you can't see face to face. But then you can actually tell from the messages that are sent to Teams or Zoom. It's like, ooh, okay, that's no good. Why did you react that way? And then I was thinking, okay, it's actually mental health. Not just men. There's ladies in our team as well. They're also affected really badly, and then they're really wanting to get out of the project. And you can see the relief when they actually the project is wrapping up. Then I'm out of this project. I'm so relieved. You can see the change of the facial expression. It was crazy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll share a little bit about my story. Around about 14, 15 years ago, I took on a role and instantly felt like all the conversations I was having were becoming absolutely critical as to whether this thing was going to work or fail. And I became really obsessed and consumed with each and every conversation, and would lay awake at night thinking about how to solve things. And I've learnt this word in the recent times, catastrophize. And I think some of us become so good at catastrophizing, laying awake at night thinking about, if this happens, then that might happen, and what about this and what about that, and playing things out ahead of what we should in our minds. And that became my real problem, and to a point where it actually affected my whole body, and you could see me scratching myself, and rash broke out, and losing sleep, and overindulging in the things that I thought would fix it, and all of the pitfalls, so to speak.
So it's risk mitigation on steroids.
Kind of, yeah. Well, that was the thought of how it would cure itself, but it doesn't cure itself. So I had to sit with someone and unpack and rewind and unwind some of the thought processes I'd sort of built up in my mind.
Does that has to do with your own sort of personality, that everything has to be perfect?
Probably, Ben. Yes, probably. Perfectionism.
Yeah.
But, also just sort of not having a wide enough perspective, or just getting too much in the detail.
Yeah.
Tim, you talked about lockdown. You were, I guess, getting up to the good part to talk about things or processes of unwinding some of the symptoms we find ourselves suffering.
Yeah.
What were you going to say about that?
Yeah, so something that really helped me, particularly through lockdowns when it was really challenging, was a few things. It was headspace, it was people, and it was being able to work that into a rhythm of life and having consistency with that. So before lockdowns or coronavirus is even a thing, in like 2019, I had a really good friend that got me into golf. He's just one of my mates. He was a youth pastor at a church around the corner. He just invited me along to play a few rounds of golf, and it was just one of those times where we just had 4 hours together and we would just chat about life. And then eventually at one point we were just talking about how for him this thing of playing golf and just playing with people and talking with people and being able to play by himself and just have time with just him and God was just something that really kept him grounded. And it was almost like a little bit of a light switch for me that actually, this is what I've been feeling actually now that we've been playing golf kind of every week or every 2 weeks. And so during the lockdowns, what was a real blessing was that for some reason golf was one of the only sports that you could actually still go out and play occasionally, not all the time, but when we're still in some of the stages of lockdowns, that was it. And so for me in those times, playing golf every week, it was a time where I could get headspace. I would be outside, I would have 4 hours where I could just switch off and forget about coronavirus. I could just forget about work, forget about the problems that I've got, and I would just almost like have this time set aside just to clear my head. And then occasionally you also, at the same time, you get opportunities to play with other people. And generally, golfers are a weird group. We're kind of a bit insular, but you would play with a lot of the same people. And so I still do get to play with like small group of people, and that group becomes really close. Golf is like the thing that brings us together, but actually after a while, on the course, you talk about life. You start to bring up the real things. When you're hitting the 18th green, you're getting a bit tired. Some of the barriers come down. You actually start talking about some things that really matter. And so when you get to the 19th hole, the car park of the golf course, you just begin to talk about life and things that really you struggle with and chat about, and you can pray for them. And that was just something that for the last 3 years has been really significant for me, not only like physically, but mentally and spiritually as well.
It's great. How about you, Aaron? When you think about, you talked a bit about the guys on the work site, your own life, what do you do? What's some of the routines or rhythms do you think that actually help you keep the focus off the material stuff, or, and more on relationships?
Seeing how these guys struggle, it helps me to put more of a focus on God and where I am. Helps me to pray for them while I'm next to them, not verbally, but in my head, silent prayer. But look, praying is a lot. Like I do a lot of praying through the day. I normally have my earmuffs on. I'm just in my own head, so I'm, thinking about my future, thinking about my family, and praying. Not 100% consistently, but I do think a lot about where God wants me and these guys, and it's sort of it's just a habit, really. I get into this habit of talking and to myself and praying about how I want my life to be, how I want their life to be, and just thinking about their life and how they can change, and kind of speaking it like in my mind to hope that it comes to fruition.
That's cool. I didn't think about that, but obviously with earmuffs on, if you're working on the tools and you're in your own little world, that's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, it's where I am most of the day.
How about you, Chris? Practical things that you've worked on or have been useful to you?
A little bit out of both of what you guys have said, actually. I think the exercise is one thing, and that's really important. Also, getting the focus off myself is really important, and I think that's what you're touching on as well, is that if we can have a heart for others, then it causes us to get out of that self-deceptive talk that you were kind of touching on, right? And I resonated completely with what you're saying. I catastrophize, and the other part for me is that I have this incredible fear, and when it occurs, get right down into the rabbit holes around letting people down, right? So which creates a cycle. So one of the things that you spoke about, Tim, in getting together with people and being strengthened by that group, one of the insidious things around mental health is that whilst we all know cognitively what we need to be around others, for many, you actually withdraw. Right. And, I'm by looking at me, you wouldn't tell, and I'm not a massive cyclist, but I do enjoy cycling. And I put it into that analogy. When you see a cycling group, a peloton, and I can sit at the back of that group on the wheel, and I can be drawn along, it's 30% easier. The minute that I'm 1.5 meters behind, I'm done. I'm spat at the back. And I've experienced that cycling many times where the group leaves and you have that moment which is, I can't get back on. There is nothing I can do. Interestingly, that's analogy for how I have felt many times relationally, which is I've let that relationship slip, I can't get back on. And the tension of knowing the only way out of this for me is with them, but I can't draw myself back to them. And that's that feeling. And that's where getting out of myself and actually getting over the catastrophizing of things is absolutely critical. It's one of those things, you just need to have that group, whether it's small or large. You need to have someone who you can talk to and say, or someone who's got the courage and, good enough mate or friend or colleague to see the look in the eyes and say, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Are you okay? And that's why that's such a simple message, but it's so important.
It's good. Richard, you meet a lot of people.
This is quite cathartic. I'm processing what I'm feeling as we're talking about this. I do spend a lot of time with people and invest a lot of time investing in mentoring and hanging out with people. And for me, that's my natural gift, and I love doing that. But in order to do that, I actually have learnt I need to take some time out and some time to stop and reflect. And for the last probably 6, maybe 7 years, I've developed a prayer regime in my life every quarter. So the first day of the quarter, I take a half day of prayer, goes in my diary, and it's just alone time with me. Second day of the month, it's a full day. Third day of the month, I do 2 days overnight by myself.
Wow.
And I spend 2 days in prayer, retreat. Sometimes it's praying, it's walking, it's reading, it's listening to worship music. Sometimes it's sleeping if I'm really tired.
Yeah.
But it's 2 days away. And I've found over 6 years, 7 years, this has been what's recharged my batteries. This has been what's helped me to refocus on what I'm doing in my work, how I'm investing my time. My wife is very quick to say, Richard, no is a complete sentence in and of itself. You don't need to say yes to everything. And it's about, like Chris was saying, trying to please everyone, not wanting to let anyone down. That's me.
Okay.
But without my prayer retreats and my quiet time, and in quiet time I'm meaning a day or two a month, I would not be able to, do what I do, travel as much as I do, and have the same level of input that I do. And these are the times when I hear from God, I stop, I journal what I think God's saying to me. And it used to be a bit of a bind, and another prayer day next week. But now I'm actually hanging out for one. I'm hanging out for one next week. I think, great, a prayer day. I can stop, get off the treadmill, and just stop and listen rather than be talking.
It's interesting. Something you said there resonated with me, that, and Ben, you touched on this before around that lack of sleep, and so did you, and I think we probably all have, and so have all of you. But I would get so worked up into that. And so just a simple little retrain your brain step for me. If I'm up at night obsessing about something, I've taken it a simple thing of saying, thanks God for reminding me this needs to be number one on my to-do list. Now shut up, brain, and go to sleep. Like it's maybe rather than turning that from something that I'm generating myself, is allow God to speak into that to say, this, hey, gently, this is something you need to deal with, but don't obsess, right? Don't solve it. Yeah. Solve it tomorrow. Yeah. And I think, forcing yourself to act, you have to flick a switch and stop the cycle. But that's, Ben, I think we've all been there when you shared that, that obsessing, which is so destructive, because then the tiredness and the insomnia is bad for your health.
You just get into one of those sort of spiral. Yeah. Just got sucked into. Yeah. Yeah. It become not very effective at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I understand that. I think you mentioned exercise, which is really a good thing, because during lockdown, I basically every day, 1 hour, 60. Remember that you got 60 minutes to exercise. Yeah. I basically sort of plan my route, so no pedestrian crossing. I don't have to wait for the light to turn.
To keep moving, yeah.
Just keep moving. So basically, 59 minutes, 52 seconds. Done my exercise. You feel good about it. But during that 1 hour, and I'll probably sort of pray. I sort of call up for God, and then I'll pray for other people who actually sort of struggle as well. And there's certain parts of the lockdown periods, I did a bit of journal, and writing journals, and then when I look back, reading all those pages, I realized that, I've been talking about I need to do this. Day 1, day 15, I need to do this. I haven't done it yet. Day 45, I need to do this. So it's a good thing that then I realize that I better do this. Maybe day 90 is yep, I've done this. So it is a good thing. So journal is one of those things that I use to just sort of help to cope with those struggles that I'm in. And a lot of things, a lot of ideas, like artistic ideas, actually came from running and as well as journaling. Yeah,
it's great. It's good. And I think the good thing is here, everyone's mentioned something different of a strategy. But some of the things that, as I was talking about my particularly dark time, I actually sat with a counsellor / psychologist, I guess, who actually sat me down and just threw caution to the wind and said, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen here to you, right? And actually led my mind to some of those places where I could see that I was the one bringing this on myself rather than this is being done to me. You know what I'm saying? So, and you guys shared lots of different ideas. This in some ways was followed on from that, like actually parking, giving over your cares, like at the end of the day, like practically going, okay, God, I'm giving you this thing that I'm worried about. I'm going to let it go now. I'm not going to ask you to take it from me, because that's something I think a lot of us do, say, oh, God, please take away this problem. Well, he's not going to just zap us, really, is he, with that? It's up to us to give over. And he says, cast your cares on the Lord, for the Lord cares for you, you know. So I would actually visualise myself throwing my rubbish on God at the end of the day, the things that I couldn't solve today, so that I would go to bed with a quiet mind. And I feel like I've actually parked all that stuff. It was something that's sort of, you know, retrained or started to rewire my brain. And it didn't happen overnight, but there was a breakthrough point where I went, oh, okay, I've been sort of allowing my mind to spiral down here. But the good news is that if it can spiral down, then it can probably spiral up. So there's got to be practical things, and you guys have shared lots of great practical things. What about resources, though? Tim, you talk about playing golf, but you've brought some resources into your world, I know, that have helped you, and I'm sure each of us have got something different. What's something that's really helped you, a resource?
Probably the big one was a book that I read by John Mark Comer called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And reading that, I think I've been blessed to read that as a young person, to sort of get ahead of the train as someone who, I kind of read that just as I was about to start full-time work. And so he just has a lot of really like great points. I think it's like 4 points in that book of just to like almost like simplify and calm your life down, and just to have like a really good, I think he calls it a rule of life, a way just to set your life up that is, it's beautiful, it's simplistic, it's wholesome, it's kind of this great vision of like Jesus' promise of life and life to the full. And so he teaches on things like Sabbath, on simplicity, silence, and solitude. And so that was like something that I read, and it was life-changing. And part of the reason why I lean into golf, it's because it's like Sabbath for me. It's like a day of rest. I get to go out for 4 hours, spend time in, you know, the creation of the world, in the sun, and it's really like, it's probably the consistency of doing it as well. So with Richard, every quarter having a prayer day, there's something about that consistency that for me really helps me keep grounded mentally. Yeah.
Aaron, is there anything that you listen to or read, or anything that's encouraged you along the way in particular?
Reading the Bible and hearing God say, don't conform to this world, renew your mind. And renewing my mind is something that I'm kind of seeking out at the moment, what God has for me in that area. And just changing it for the better, and praying more about my mind and how to think my way out of certain issues. And you know, I like to every morning I get up, first thing before I even turn the lights on, I just have a moment of gratitude.
Wow.
And I just thank God for probably 5 things that I have in my life, each morning, and it really sets me up and helps me to think of those through the day as well.
Fantastic.
So that's a big thing for me.
It's good.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, it's been different things at different times. I know, a couple of the themes that you guys, certainly when I was in some reasonably dark places, a couple of years back, with feeling like I got one nostril above the waterline, if that. And the first resource is professional help, and that's the first thing I would say to anybody who's struggling with these challenges. Just find someone to talk to. And the thing that I learned through going through that was that, and if you've got a good GP and trusted medical people around you, talk to them, and they will say, hey, the first person you go to might not be the person who's going to help you, right? So, and we're so blessed to be in a health system that allows us to have mental health plans and allows us to explore, find someone who you can connect with and allow that to be your resource. Those people are there appointed by God for you, right? The next thing is to be in relationship with God. My hiding place when I was young, I remember when I was doing my HSC or VCE as it is now, coming home from school at 3 p.m, going to my hiding place in my bed, pull the doona over my head and not wake up until 7 o'clock the next morning and go to school and do it again. Wow. That was my hiding place, was being asleep. As a 50-year-old, going to a meeting, getting caned by a client, going to the car, grabbing a McDonald's hamburger and finding a car park and going to sleep. Unconsciousness became my hiding place. Wow. I read the Psalms where David says, God, may I rest in you. You're my hiding place. And so I found just a simple little app. It might have even been called Abide, I'm not sure. And I would just every morning on the way to work, I would just have 15, 20 minutes, a little reading, some quiet space, a bit of breathing exercise. And it really was just about allowing God to be refuge. And that was revolutionary in changing my outlook. I think that was the key thing. And the third one was, so there's, professional assistance. There's God, the creator of the universe, who is here for us in love unbounding. And the third one is also just taking it easy on ourselves and being a little bit of self-help. Just a story. You talked about casting your burdens. When we lived in California, we lived at the bottom of a massive hill, the high desert, and the big valley, and we were at the bottom of it. Train line coming down that cutting with a big sweeping curve, and it wasn't every year, but trains derailed at the bottom of that all the time. And I'm not talking the engine coming off, we're talking, a couple of hundred cars all crunched up together. Came down that hill and the brakes wouldn't cope. There was too much baggage. And so they'd get to the bottom and they would crash. For me, I had a mental switch, which was, I'm actually feeling like that train. I've got a limited brake. I've got 400 carriages of crap that I'm dealing with. And like you said, just going one by one, what's in that carriage? Yeah. Stress about work. I have to give that over to you. What's in that carriage? Haven't been talking to Liz and I'm letting her down and so forth, and I'm not a great husband. Rather than going into that thing, releasing that carriage over to God and just unburdening ourselves, and you get to that point which is, okay, I can cope. So that's the be your own best friend. Allow God to be your best friend. Seek help where you need it from outside, but also just be a friend to yourself. And don't bear burdens that you don't need to. Give them back over.
If you wrote a book called 400 Carriages of Crap, I'd give it a read.
Well, let's do that over a coffee. We can write it together. That's a bad image coming into my head at the bottom of that hill now, Tim.
I think sometimes we can be too self-reflective and we can dwell too much and be too inward-looking. And our society, we all live in a bubble. And during COVID, all our bubbles shrank. And when you're in a smaller bubble, the problems look bigger and bigger. So for me, I think one of the ways to climb out of any frustration or pressure you might feel is to have some input into someone else's life. Yeah. To sit down and to have a coffee with someone. I used to do coffee walks around Eastland Shopping Centre because that was the only thing that Dan would let us do during lockdown. And I had my connections with people holding an empty cup of coffee, pretending it was still full so we didn't have to wear a mask, and having a talk and mentoring people as I walked around Eastlands. And I find that whenever I give back and I try to sow into other people's lives, it puts any challenge that I have in perspective. Two other quick things. One is we love noise. We want to fill our lives with noise, with music, with social media, with television, with whatever it is. And sometimes I get in my car to drive to an appointment and the Lord just says, turn the radio off. I want to have you to myself. And I turn the radio off and I don't have any other music. And I consciously try to use that time in the car to pray, to talk, to think about some of the issues. And I find the silence really helpful. And the third thing, which is deeply spiritual and incredibly profound, is to go sailing.
Wow.
I often would get back from a really intense trip in Asia or India or Africa, and I have met some of the most amazing people on the planet and seen some of the worst situations you could ever imagine. And for me, my switch off was to jump on that boat and sail across Port Phillip Bay, because when you're looking at the tide, you're trying to dodge the boat, dodge the other boats, you're looking at the wind, you're checking out the water, you're seeing where the rocks are. You do not have time to think about anything else. And it's like taking a very busy whiteboard and cleaning it off, and I come back tired physically, but refreshed and my brain cleared. And I find that really cathartic.
That's great.
So if anyone wants to come sailing, just let me know.
Golf, sailing.
So one of the things I use is actually I copy psalms on my journal.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So just basically it's an expression of my prayer. So
Yeah.
whatever the psalm is actually sort of
You write it down.
on that words, I just copy word for word.
Okay.
You know, there are psalms that's really angry, some that's really desperate. It's just like, so basically, just get everything out from through psalm. It helps me to actually pray. Another book that I read during COVID is actually The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's not actually really a Christian, but then she was talking about looking after yourself a little bit, and then and not too tight on yourself, you know. And one of the things I learned probably about a few weeks ago, I got this massive cold. It's really bad, flu, and it's not COVID. And I was committed. I signed up for a half marathon race in end of July, and I couldn't train because coughing was so bad. There's no way that I could run. And then I could actually work out that, hang on, you can't run now, right? You know, even though the week before the race I was getting better, but then you haven't been training. Right? There's no way you can actually finish 21K. And I got to just let go and just, you're committed to the event, but you're not committed to the training. So there's no way you can run 21K at risk of actually sort of injure yourself, even further injury. I decided just let go and let it go, and let it go gracefully, not grudgingly, so that you feel better. And then when I look back, I say, yep, that was the right decisions to do. Yeah,
That's great. You talked about mentoring. It's nice to mentor others, but it's actually nice to be mentored. So one of the things I've enjoyed is having people like yourself, Richard, older people in my life who I get to share other than family is actually really important, because you get another lens or another angle on your life, which I think is really special. We're pretty much out of time, guys. It's been good. It's been great to hear all your different thoughts. Thank you for sharing. For those of you watching, thanks for tuning in. We are going to have a men's event, grand final breakfast on the 24th of September, on the grand final day here in Melbourne. We have Dave Burt, a leader in our community, coming to speak specifically about men's mental health. So make sure you sign up for that, become a part of it. It's going to be great. Tim, Aaron, Chris, Richard, Ben, thank you all so much for sharing. And we really appreciate you coming in, giving your time today. So thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.